Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. We are in the company of Christopher Dickey of The Daily Beast. We're also joined by Hamdan Mostafavi of Courrier International, which is not just a weekly magazine, but also
a website.
Claude Guibal, senior correspondent at public radio station France Culture, which you can also find. More and more people are finding it, the podcasts on the web.
Yeah, a lot of podcasts, millions of podcasts.
Growing international success.
Absolutely.
And Louis Magloire-Comayou, chair of the African Press Club here in Paris. While Iranians were celebrating, Kenyans were grieving. The nation reeling after yet another bloodbath claimed by Somalia's Al-Shebab insurgents. At least 147 killed. That's more than double Nairobi's 2013 Westgate shopping mall attack. The target, Christians at Garissa University in the northeast near Somalia's border. Christopher Dickey, I want to ask you first about the numbers here. It seems as though there's one-upmanship with these attacks, and it's 147 people killed.
Sure, they just went to kill as many people as they could, and those people were almost completely undefended. I think there were 2 security guards on that campus. And in fact, students had been complaining about that. I think anybody who lives in that sort of area not too far from the Somali border is worried about security in a general sense. But as I understand it, Al-Shebab had even talked about an attack on Garissa University. So, you know, it was an easy target. If you go into it with automatic weapons, you're going to kill a lot of people, and they did. They did.
Louis Magloire-Comayou, the aim seems to be to discourage the Kenyans from taking part in that peacekeeping operation in Somalia. We've heard opposition politicians this Friday start to question whether or not it's a good idea.
The fact is, we are in a part of Africa where the African Union has played a very good role. Generally considering, people say Africa is not able to face security issues, war issues in the continent. But here, it's the good example to say Africa can do it. And they tried to do it by the African Union forces, first of all, and then you had all the neighboring countries who have tried to help Somalia in fighting those Shabaab. But it was Ethiopia at the beginning who was attacked. Then it was Kenya. But they prevented all of those countries because the fact here is they want to rebuild the big Somali country. We are here in the identity revendication. They are not looking for a political issue. They want to build their country, taking from, I think, the 5 countries there, from Djibouti to Kenya, where they can unite all the Somalis of that part. And they prevented all the neighboring countries who could take part to the war that they don't want them to get in. And if they get in, they should pay for what they've done. And that's what is going on. Unfortunately, when the African Union is facing those cases in Somalia, they cannot go in those other countries to help them fighting also the security matters in the neighboring countries. So we need the help of all the other countries. For example, China, who is very present there. We need also American and all the other powerful countries of the Security Council.
But there seems to be something particular with Kenya itself, which is the president, hours before the attack, dismissing travel warnings that had been issued by the UK and Australia, saying our friends, I could call up, in fact, the exact quote of what he said, but it was to, yeah, he said, the travel advisories being issued by our friends are not genuine.
You have that in all African countries. When you consider Cameroon with Boko Haram, when you said it is not a good destination, all of them will tell you, no, you are safe. If you come in the touristic zone, you don't have any problem. You will have militaries, you will have police officers who will help you to visit the country safely. You will have the same thing in Senegal concerning the Casamance region. They will tell you, no, there's no problem. In fact, it's because those countries need to improve the tourism industry. So they need it. And they sometimes say it not because they want to put people in danger, but just because they need that money. They need those people to get in the country to discover it and to let some money in there, by the way.
Claude Guibal?
Reminds me of Egypt, which exactly stays the same. Yeah, well, so the Shababs are actually losing weight in Somali
Yes.
and gaining more and more influence outside Somalia. And in Kenya, I mean,
Are they gaining, or is it a question of, because when these attacks happen, and the same has been said about Boko Haram in Nigeria, that it's often because they've got their backs to the wall that they carry out these attacks?
yeah, you mean as a kind of survival or, well, yes, but don't forget how many Somalis are in Kenya facing very tough life, very big problems, facing racism, facing a lot of xenophobia. There's also conditions in Kenya which help the Shabab to gain more kind of popularity amongst the Somali refugees. I don't know actually if they're gaining much weight, but it's the same thing as Boko Haram. There is a competition these days, and the Shababs are linked to Al-Qaeda, and between Al-Qaeda and now Daesh, you know, there is this kind of competition who's going to be the strongest, who's going to be more spectacular, who's going to kill the most people.
Yes, but I was thinking 25 years ago, I was spending a lot of time in Kenya, and back then everybody would talk about the Shifta, and who were Somalis who were coming down and poaching elephants, and ivory. Yes, but they were organized. There were a lot of them, and it made life dangerous. You could go far from the Somali border into parks like Tsavo and still worry about whether you were going to run into Shifta with Kalashnikovs. That shows you how porous the border was to begin with. This is a shift now from that kind of criminal activity to political activity. But what really makes it different is what Claude is talking about. It's that they say, we're identifying ourselves with Al-Qaeda. If the Shifta 25 years ago had said, we identify ourselves with Al-Qaeda, we would have looked at them completely differently, even though they were doing exactly the same thing. And that really is what makes it seem that Al-Shebab is growing. They're in trouble in Somalia, and they're hitting soft targets in Kenya and other places, very soft targets. 4 people took over the Westgate Mall, 4 people. I don't know how many were involved in the attack in Garissa, but I bet it wasn't even a dozen. So how many were involved, do you know?
No, we can know it now. But the fact is that during a certain time, they were in the dead corners of the news. No one was talking about them. And now they are going out of that. They are showing this still can be dangerous to everyone. And the fact is, if we consider when we conduct a war as what Americans did with Restore Hope in Somalia, if we just think with conducting military acts, we will end up with that, we are making a big mistake, because those countries are very fragile, and that is the most important issue. They are fragile. We have poverty, but not only poverty. In the past, we had desperate people who were involving in those movements because they had no other issue. But today, you have people who are not only poor, but they have some people who are helping them, coming from Arabia Saudi, coming from Qatar and from all other countries, financing them very well, but not for good issues, not for the welfare.
For the welfare of people. Some nations, obviously, weaker than they seem. Others surprising us. This week, the list of African nations that can boast peaceful change of ruling party at the ballot box grew longer. Better yet, in Nigeria, the incumbent loser picked up the phone to congratulate the winner before the final results were complete.
It is you, Nigerians, that have won. The people have shown their love for our nation and their belief in democracy.
I've always affirmed nobody's ambition is worth the blood of any Nigerian. The unity, stability, and progress of our dear country is more important than anything else.
How was this seen from your nation, Cameroon, which borders Nigeria?
Oof, he's gone. No, it was ridiculous, simply because the issue of Boko Haram is a very serious issue. And he has been using it as a political weapon to win the elections in Nigeria. That is what was really not fair from him.
Really, because speaking of Nigerians, what registered most with them was things like the electricity not working and corruption.
Yes, they have those issues. In Nigeria, you have to be rich if you want to have all the elementary services, water, electricity, and so on. So it is a common way to live. But the fact is, security was something also important. We've had the rebels in the Niger Delta. They fought them. They've succeeded in fighting them. Why doesn't he spend energy? Why hasn't he spent the same energy to control Boko Haram? And even when the neighbors, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, decided to help him, he expelled them from.
But how do Cameroonians feel about the way the election happened? There were these,
We have a president who is there since now 32 years. We hope something will happen the same way in Cameroon, but I don't know if that will happen in 2018.
Hamdan Mustafavi, what are some of the reactions you've seen?
Well, I've been talking to a friend reporter, Sophie Bouillon of Libération, who is now in Nigeria, and she told me Goodluck Jonathan was a very bad president, but what he did on that day to recognize this defeat made him an historic president and a good president in a way. Because she said people were really afraid after the vote, and they were just waiting to see what's going to happen. I mean, is it going to be a civil war, or is it going to be an historic moment? And I think even if the way they voted, I mean, there have been some places where they voted in the dark, where the system was not perfect, but there have been the digital system that
the biometric voting.
Yeah, so that was very important because people were trusting the result of that election, and I mean, coming from a country where the election results can be discussed sometimes, I think it's very important that people. That's what gives people hope that this election is quite true, and whatever comes next could be good.
All right, those with a long memory remember that the winner had an earlier embodiment. He was General Buhari, who ruled in the mid-'80s with an iron fist at times. At 72, and after 3 losing runs for president, the now president-elect insists that the past is the past.
You have voted for a party and president that will serve and govern, but never rule over you.
Claude Guibal, when you look at what's happening in Nigeria, most Nigerians saying they take him at his word.
Well, what happened actually is really interesting. What happened in Nigeria, I hope, will be a model for the rest of Africa and other countries. I mean, of course, it's not. I mean, violence is still a risk. I mean, and these elections. I mean, there have been elections-related violences. Killed 58 people were killed during the last 2 months. So it was not like a bed of roses. Come on, but what happened gives President Buhari a real legitimacy, and that is, I mean, the key word for this election and for what he's going to implement now. But his challenge is facing so much challenges because Boko Haram is one thing, corruption is another, livelihood conditions is another problem as well. How will he fight corruption within the army as well? I mean, there's so many things, and the country is divided now along regional and religious lines, and that is a huge challenge.
Boko Haram could be the least of his problems at the end of the day. I mean, all the other things you mentioned, I don't think he can possibly solve. Boko Haram is ultimately a military issue, and if he does a little development and a lot of military action up in the northeast, they may have some success in crushing it.
All right. Some a little wary, by the way, of General Buhari, like Kenya's The Star, which displays this cartoon showing former President Obasanjo telling Buhari, "You remind me of me. I took power in a coup and got democratically elected. Now I'm a champion of democracy." And you see the headline is there. It says, "Democracy made in Nigeria." So Kenyans a little bit wary of what's going on in West Africa. Let's see, by the way, if the civility displayed in Nigeria rubs off on its former colonial power. On Monday, Prime Minister David Cameron made the short trip from Downing Street to Buckingham Palace to formally ask the Queen to dissolve Parliament. There he is. and call a May 7th general election. Then, after making that short trip, he dropped the gloves.
In 38 days, you face a stark choice. The next Prime Minister walking through that door will be me or Ed Miliband. You can choose an economy that grows, that creates jobs, that generates the money to ensure a properly funded and improving national health service, a government that will cut taxes for 30 million hard-working people, and a country that is safe and secure. Or you can choose the economic chaos of Ed Miliband.
Or you can choose the economic chaos of Ed Miliband. By the way, it's a sign of just how fragmented UK politics have become. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 party leaders in a televised debate on Thursday. They're the leader of the opposition, aforementioned by Cameron, defended staying in Europe and took his shots at the incumbent.
David, you just said that you were tackling tax avoidance. Let's look at the reality on this. You haven't acted on the tax havens. You haven't acted on the hedge funds. Now, you have to ask yourself at home, why won't David Cameron act on those hedge funds? They fund his party. He won't act. You need leadership that will stand up.
All right, and at the end of the day, Christopher Dickey, we're going to see an exciting election campaign, but it's going to conclude with a winning party that will probably have the fewest number of votes since the war, possibly ever.
Well, yes, there's a pretty widespread assumption that it will be a hung parliament, that in fact no single party will be able to form a government. They'll have to call in another party. I don't think that the Conservatives will be able to ally themselves with Nick Clegg and the Liberal Democrats again, because among other things, I don't think the Lib Dems are going to gather many votes. The key player is likely to be the Scots, the Scottish National Party, which lost the referendum for independence, but is still hugely popular in Scotland. And they hate the Tories. They hate the Conservatives. We had a very good piece about this in the Daily Beast a couple of days ago. They look set to win 50 of the 59 Scottish seats in Parliament.
But that's not bad news for the Tories. That's bad news for Labour.
Well, depends on how Labour wants to relate it.
They're going to lose all their seats in Scotland.
Well, they may, but they will lose a lot of seats in Scotland, but they will also ally themselves with the Scottish National Party and probably win the prime ministership, or at least they have a good shot at it.
A regional party, Hamdan Mustafavi, the Scottish National Party, which will play kingmaker. What does that say about today's Europe?
Well, that's the same in Spain with Catalonia, and now regions are very important. And we saw how tense was the campaign for the referendum in the last days. It was very, very strong, and Cameron has had some kind of a victory in the end because the Scots stayed. But now he says me or Ed Miliband will walk down this door, but he will not be alone, in fact, because he will have those other parties who will have to govern with him. So, but I think we will all be watching to see if Cameron is going to do that Europe referendum if he gets back into power.
Well, and who will Cameron ally with? I mean, the people who are going to be cutting into Cameron's votes are going to be UKIP, especially. There's no way that Cameron can have an alliance with UKIP, whether he has the UK Independence Party, whether he has a referendum or not. But it's going to be a real messy scene. It's going to be a real messy scene. And I'm betting on Miliband.
All right, but to add a further wrinkle, Cameron right now is the one who's getting a little bit of a boost in the poll. Of course, there's a long time to go before they vote on May the 7th. Each day brings its startling dose of revelations on the Germanwings crash in the French Alps. This Friday, it was that the plane sped up before impact. On Thursday, German prosecutors revealed that co-pilot Andreas Lubitz had done internet researches on how to commit suicide and lock the door of the cockpit in the week leading up to the eve of the doomed flight. I mean, you look at this, Claude Guibal, it's each day brings a lot of more morbid revelations about this man, Andreas Lubitz.
And each day shows more and more how disgusting the whole issue is, and the way we media are treating this story. Because look what's happening from the beginning. The questions we are asking, you know, really reveal the darker sides of our society. Was the man a Muslim or not? Is depressed? No, thanks God. is depressed? Does that mean that when you are depressed, you have suicidal tendencies? Does that mean if you have suicidal tendencies that you are a killer, someone who kills 140 people? It's morbid. It's voyeurism. I mean, we all know that these people were aware of what was going on, and this is just awful. Do we need to say, oh, there's a video who tells blah, 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 and you can hear the sound, and you can hear the shouts, and you can hear everything? I mean...
Well, it's all very disconcerting. I mean, I fly all the time, and have been flying all my life. Now I found myself after this crash worried in a way that I wasn't worried before. I mean, it's stupid. I mean, how many suicidal pilots are there? Not many, I hope.
Possibly 14 in 40 years.
Yeah, and which is
possibly, but there's not
very
all
small and very unconfirmed number.
Yeah,
and yet still it's disconcerting, because if an airline like Lufthansa, which is really what we're talking about, could miss the possible indications of this, that's really bad. And as we know more about the premeditation of this suicide murder, it's even creepier. You know, he flew the first leg down from Dusseldorf to Barcelona that day. He could have crashed if the pilot had walked out of the cabin earlier in the day. That would have been a whole different group of people he would have murdered. He had to wait until the turnaround and the return for the pilot to leave the cabin. Sure, go ahead, leave the cabin for a minute.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Unfortunately, I want to thank you, Christopher Dickey. I want to thank as well Claude Guibal, Louis Magloire, Kamayu, Hamdan Mostafavi. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Shona Bhattacharya.
Hi, Francois.
And, of course, Iran and those overnight celebrations, we began with them, and they're still celebrating a bit on the
internet as well. That's right. Well, Barack Obama's speech Thursday was closely watched in Iran, especially because it was the first time since the Islamic Revolution in 1979 that a U.S. president was broadcast live on Iranian state TV. And during the speech, a number of Iranians took selfies.
Hamdan was mentioning this.
With Obama in the background to celebrate this historic broadcast. We've got this man posed with his wife. We've got this man pinching Obama's cheek very sweetly on the television. Said, you know, this is as close as a lot of Iranians are ever going to get to Obama. And it really seems like a lot of them enjoyed it. Now, there's also a drawing of a selfie, to stay in the selfie theme, of Obama taking a picture with the Iranian Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But you can see that Khamenei is actually crossing his fingers, which is suggesting that Iran may not plan on keeping its promises. To be fair, that drawing was actually published a few weeks ago, so before yesterday's deal. Now, there were celebrations in the streets of Iran as well, though not until after Obama's speech, because according to the New York Times correspondent in Tehran, everybody was glued to their television sets. So celebrations started after midnight at local time, with people taking to the streets. And this AP journalist in Tehran says people even waved dollar bills from the cars. I'm not sure that those are dollar bills, but anyway, that's what he says that he saw, this journalist. And there's also pictures from this morning when Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif landed at the airport. He was greeted by a large crowd, a hero's welcome, waving flags. It must be said, though, that all of these pictures that are from Twitter is banned in Iran. And to get all these tweets onto the internet, Iranians use anti-filters or international internet connections.
I see Hamdan nodding. She knows all about this.
Right. Quite a feat for them.
Twitter, which goes in for criticism not just in Iran.
Right. There's also a song out. Now, I know that we use Twitter on this segment. You use Twitter a lot. But Belgian singer Stromae, who may not be as famous in the Anglo-speaking world as he is in France and in Belgium. He struck again, and he has published this clip for a song that had already actually come out. But it's a song that hits home and that has a catchy beat to match. Let's take a look at that video that came out this week, and I'm sure you'll recognize the tune if you haven't already heard it.
L'amour est comme l'oiseau de Twitter. On est bleu de lui seulement pour 48 heures. D'abord on s'affilie, ensuite on se follow. On en devient fêlé et on finit solo. Prends garde à toi et à tous ceux qui vous like. Les sourires en plastique sont souvent des coups d'hashtag.
Yeah, it's a great song. The song is called Carmen.
Saying how love is fleeting just like Twitter.
Well, it's actually more, I would say it's even more of a critique of Twitter and social networks in general.
Than of love.
So, than of love, and saying how, yeah, I guess love sort of follows, but real love in real life is sort of blocked by this growing bird that grows with every follower that you get, and that sort of takes over your life, and that just keeps you from living and even seeing the actual life that you have before you, because you're so obsessed with all of these virtual indicators, I guess, to see how popular you are.
Well.
The song is doing well. It's been seen millions of times since it came out 2 days ago, the clip again, and it's a big hit. But some people are calling Stromae a hypocrite because they're saying that he has the internet to thank for his fame. I mean, he's an avid Twitter, Facebook, and recently now Instagram fan. And this writer on the Nouvelle Obs blog Le Plus argues that, in fact, Stromae is biting the hand that feeds him because he's criticizing the very tools that are actually helping him get his song out there, getting us all hooked on his latest hit. So.
All right. Well, it's something to think about. Our
As we
hashtag, by the way, is F24debate. I want to thank you, Shona Bhattacharya. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.